The adventures of Team Coffee and Team Sun continue in Before the Dawn, the sequel novel to After the Fall that released last summer. Before the Dawn has a release date scheduled for July 21st of this year, at least according to Amazon, where I pre-ordered my copy from, and we got a preview as to the events going on in Before the Dawn just a few days ago. I'll leave a link in the description below so you guys can go there, read the preview for yourselves. It includes the prologue, chapters 1 and 2 of Before the Dawn. I think there might be a little bit more added on to Chapter 2 when the actual novel releases, but we won't know until that date. In this video, I will be going over all of the events that take place in this preview, so spoiler warning is in effect. I'll also give my predictions and theories as to where I think the events will be going and what certain plot points may happen based on the information that we get from this preview. Now, the prologue itself starts off, well, with Sun alone, yet again, away from his team, away from backup, and he's going to be noble again. He sees a woman being stalked by 3 other people down a back alley, so he's going to go stop them. The woman does end up getting away when he draws the goons' attention, but when they turn around, he sees that they're all wearing gas masks, so he can't really see their faces, and we only get a description of them briefly, and they're only referred to by their main color inspirations after that point. We got brown, who seems to be the ringleader, then we got green, and we got pink. And Sun is planning on fighting all 3 of them, just 1v3. They're all unarmed, and Sun thinks that he has a pretty good advantage, which, again, little spoiler warning, he doesn't for very long. He ends up starting to fight these 3, and we learn a little bit about his semblance when he starts this. He claps his hands together and focuses on an image that centers himself, calms himself, and allows himself to focus. An image of a tree that he saw when he was a child out in the desert of Vacuo. Whether it was an illusion or not, I'm not really sure. It doesn't seem like anyone he was traveling with, including his cousin. We also learn that something may have happened to his parents at some point in Vacuo because they weren't there, and Sun didn't really seem to want to mention them, so something may have happened in Sun's past to his parents, maybe much like Fox's parents, that ended up just disappearing in a sinkhole, I believe. So, yeah, Vacuo is definitely a harsh environment. But Sun is able to focus on this image, draw the clones to life, and start the battle 3v3. And at the beginning, he seems to be doing okay. The clones are taking on pink and green, and they seem to be holding their own as the 2 of them are trying to fight against the clones, and then Sun personally takes on the guy named Brown. And he is able to deal a couple hits against the guy, but after landing those couple hits, it quickly turns against Sun. All of a sudden, any punch or kick that he throws, it seems to just be narrowly missing the guy. And any attack that Brown throws at Sun, it seems like Sun is just getting out of the way, but then it ends up making contact anyways, even though Sun thought he had dodged it. And eventually it ends up that Brown gets a hold of Sun and knees him in the gut. At which point, his clones dissipate, as to maintain them it takes a lot of aura, so Sun wouldn't have been able to maintain them for very long and wanted to end the fight quickly, but of course that didn't happen. And as these goons go to surround Sun, Sun whips out his weapons, RWBY Bang and Jingu Bang, and fires a shot off at Pink, and the bullets seem to just phase right through her. Her outline becomes a little bit hazy, and the bullets just don't make contact. So we learn that Pink has her semblance, and eventually that all of these characters have their semblances as well. So even though they're unarmed, they're still pretty strong opponents. All of them have aura and semblances, so yeah, Sun kind of picked the wrong choice here. Though the woman did escape, so he did do some good, he's in a bad situation now. And we see our first phasing semblance in Pink. And it's quickly, you know, not turning out very well for Sun. He ends up getting one of his weapons kicked away, but he's able to go get it back. And as he's getting exhausted, he puts the bow staff together and he's using it to hold himself up. Like, he's getting exhausted, thinking that he shouldn't be as exhausted as he is. And it's a bit confusing to him that his attacks weren't hitting, that his opponent's attacks were all hitting him, even though, you know, he thought he was dodging. All 3 of them seem to be fine and ready for battle, like they haven't taken any damage at all, and it's kind of confusing to him. And right at that point, we see Tryhard, Neptune's trident, slam into the ground, although it's a Hard Light Dust copy of Tryhard. And what's interesting about this, the Hard Light Dust copy obviously indicates that Velvet is here, but it releases an electric shock that stuns the opponents momentarily. which is something very curious, that the hard light dust copies can imitate the functionality of other dust as well. I don't know if that's an inherent thing with hard light itself, that it can mimic electricity or just mimic the weapon itself, can transform itself into other dust, but that's very curious. Regardless though, Velvet is there as backup and Yatsuhashi is quick to follow. After this point, they are fighting against all three of them. Yatsuhashi takes on Green, Sun again takes on Brown, and Velvet takes on Pink. Even Yatsuhashi, with his giant greatsword, slams it down on Green. The guy claps it between his hands and is blocking it, which should be draining his aura, and yet the guy still seems fine. Sun fighting Brown seems fine. Velvet fighting Pink. Pink still seems fine. All three of them are still not really struggling in battle. They're not really at that much of an advantage anymore, so they decide to bail. And we quickly find out why they were wearing gas masks in the first place. Green starts releasing gas from his skin, and it apparently reeks, and Sun, Yatsuhashi, and Velvet are all covering their mouths, covering their faces, and gives all the other three time to escape. So, we don't know Brown's semblance, but it's obvious that he had one, and after discussing between Sun, Velvet, and Yatsuhashi, they were really confused because they seemed, well, kind of invincible. They're all thinking the same thing, that these opponents were a lot stronger than they should have been. It should have been easier to take them down. I'm guessing it had something to do with Brown's semblance, that he could influence an opponent's stamina or their strikes or their perception of an opponent's stamina and things like that. We'll probably learn that later on in the novel as it continues. We're probably going to encounter these three characters again, but for now we do know that Pink has a phasing style semblance, that occasionally she can let attacks and other things phase through her. Velvet was still landing a fair amount of hits against her though, so she can't keep this up constantly. And then Green has a semblance that can turn his aura into gas. Two unique semblances that we haven't seen anything like in the RWBY series, and I'm glad we're getting more semblances and more expansions on these types of things. We then get a little bit of a conversation between Velvet, Yatsuhashi, and Sun as Velvet and Yatsu start questioning, well, why are you out here alone, Sun? Where's the rest of your team? And we learn that Team Sun has quite a few issues, which really isn't surprising because their leader seems to like to abandon them on the regular. First going to the Vital Festival tournament by himself and not going with the rest of his team, and then abandoning them immediately after the fall of Beacon Academy to go chase some girl, as Yatsuhashi put it. And again, Sun responds with, it wasn't like that. But in his mind, he thinks not entirely. And to me, this is a confirmation that Sun did have some feelings for Blake, and that was part of his motivation for chasing after her. But again, Sun is a very kind-hearted person, and upon catching up with Blake and finding out the entire situation, why Blake ran, everything like that, he realized that she needed a friend, she needed time to recover, and his own romantic interests wasn't really at the forefront of that. Not to mention that he realized Blake really needed to reunite with Team RWBY and get some closure on things, and realized that they were still there for her regardless of what happened. All of that, but it still seems like Sun, or this did give some confirmation as to Sun's feelings for Blake. But yeah, Team Sun has some pretty big issues. Sun's also thinking to himself that, well, Sage and Scarlet have been pretty pissed at him ever since they arrived at Shade Academy a month ago, and Neptune, even though he seems like he's on Sun's side, is still seeming a bit off as well. So all of them seem to be doing fine without Sun, and now that he's back, he seems like an outsider in his own team. So yeah, right out of the gate, Team Sun is having some issues. We find out that Velvet and Yatsuhashi are out patrolling. Coco and Fox are out elsewhere in Vacuo, searching for the crown, the employers of Bertilac and Carmen from After the Fall. And we find out that Bertilac and Carmen actually escaped very quickly after reaching the settlement of Coquina, where there was a jail cell, a prison that they went to in After the Fall, and yeah, so not really too great that Bertilac and Carmen just escaped immediately, and they're on the lookout for them, as well as anyone relating to the crown, and they're out investigating on their own. But they're still having a few troubles here and there, not really gaining any leads, etc. And so Sun volunteers him and the rest of his team to help Team Coffee. Of course, without consulting the rest of his team first, because Sun knows Vacuo, whereas Team Coffee, not so much. Sure, Fox is from Vacuo, but not the city of Vacuo itself. And even though Vacuo did accept all of the stragglers from Beacon Academy, we learn that Vacuans themselves still consider them all to be outsiders. Sun is from the city of Vacuo, or at least has lived there for quite a time before he went to Haven Academy, and knows the city itself. Yatsu and Velvet are getting a bit lost, as everything seems like just a network of alleys. We get a bit of the layout of the city itself, that it's all centered around Shade Academy. Most buildings are 2 to 3 stories high, but Shade itself is towering over it all. It has canopies that extend outwards and provide shade. Nice name for Shade Academy itself, to provide shade to a good portion of the city, that fold outwards and provide the shade, etc. There's an alley down the middle, or a wide street down the middle for marketplace, etc. But the outskirts of the city of Vacuo itself are often interchanging, sometimes getting swallowed by the desert or a storm, or even if there's a heavy rainfall, once in a blue moon, whenever that happens, it could cause flooding and things could get wiped out there. If Grimm attack or burrow under the sand and cause a sinkhole as well, like, multiple things could happen, and it seems like it's pretty perilous to live in the outskirts of Vacuo, but more to the center of the city, where Shade Academy is, seems pretty safe. And Sun knows his way around the city through these alleys and pretty much says, "You guys need me." And then we move on to Chapter 1, where Team Coffee and Team Sun are all having breakfast together. And my, what a bit of an awkward breakfast it is. Though Coco does seem to be enjoying herself after learning that Velvet and Yatsuhashi had to come to Sun's rescue the night before. Because, well, Team Sun seems to have stolen a little bit of Team Coffee's thunder after their last mission in the desert. Because remember, Team Sun came and killed the Blind Worm and did aid Team Coffee in their mission. So when returning to Shade Academy, Team Sun got quite a bit of notoriety and knocked Team Coffee down a peg, because their reputation from Beacon Academy did precede them. Team Coffee was a hotshot team at Beacon, and they were the same at Shade Academy, and now some of the Vacuans and fellow classmates aren't really looking at them as fondly now that they've been saved by Team Sun. So this is just a little pick-me-up for Coco. But still, we've learned that Coco herself doesn't actually want to team up with Team Sun because she has her own opinions about them. That Sun himself is a very unreliable leader, and they are a very disjointed team, mostly because of that. They have potential, but they're certainly not meeting it, and they would only be a liability to Team Coffee, who is very close-knit and very well-functioning already. So Coco essentially says thanks, but no thanks. She just needs to get in touch with Headmaster Theodore or Professor Rumpole and try to get this investigation into the Crown made into an official assignment, which she seems to be having some trouble with. She talked to Rumpole already, but had heard nothing back in a month. And we did get a general time frame where this is taking place. It's been a few months since Team Sun, or Sun, last saw Team RWBY. When last they saw them, they were taking the Argus Limited, going to Argus. So the events of this are either taking place during Volume 7 and 8 of the actual RWBY series, or possibly even after the attack on Atlas happens at the end of Volume 7 and beginning of Volume 8 and everything that's going to take place there. So possibly, I don't think this is going to be the case though, but we might see Team RWBY or other people or someone from Atlas, a messenger saying, hey, now Atlas has fallen, Vacuo is the last kingdom standing. We might see a messenger come at some point, talk to Theo, and we might see Team Coffee and Team Sun learn about the truth of the world. Because even though Sun was there at the fall of Haven Academy, or the attack on Haven Academy, I should say, Haven is still standing, and Yang did get the relic, it seems Sun was not informed of the relics and of Salem and everything going on in the world. So that is definitely something to note. Eventually, though, the rest of Team Coffee, so Velvet, Yatsuhashi, and Fox, tell Coco that, you know, Sun's going to interfere anyways, right? We may as well just team up with him and use him to our advantage rather than have him be even more of a hindrance. And we find out that, well, it's mostly Scarlet that's really against Sun. That Scarlet is very vocal. Sage is on Scarlet's side, not really liking Sun very much, and just more staying silent, but Scarlet is definitely starting to bicker with Sun as Team Coffee is having this conversation through TeamSpeak. Neptune still seems to be on Sun's side, agreeing with them, and that's still causing more conflict between Scarlet and Neptune, and Team Sun is really, really just in disarray right now. But essentially, Coco does agree, okay, fine, we'll team up with you, but we'll get permission from RWBY first, as it seems like Scarlet was going to snitch on them if they didn't. So Scarlet seems to be a bit of a goody two-shoes, or maybe he's just trying to get back at Sun for abandoning them by trying to mess up this mission. I don't know, but it seems like Scarlet really has a bit of a vendetta, which is still completely understandable as long as it's against Sun, not really interfering with Team Coffee. But then we get to the class, or we see the classroom that Professor RWBY is teaching. A history lesson, starting off on the Great War. And Team Coffee walks in a bit late, but this class has a few notable students in it, two of which we have seen before. Reese, Cloris, and Bolin Hori. Team Auburn is definitely here, and I hope we see more of Team Auburn, because I want to see Arslan again and the rest of her team, Nolan, Bolin, Reese. Like, with the previews, or the first little hints that we got at Before the Dawn, we said that the teams, or it was said that the teams are all going to be mixed around, and Theodore's going to mix around the teams a little bit. Obviously, this is how Team Sun is going to get better, by working with other people and hopefully learning how good team members work together and work out their own issues. But maybe we'll see more of Team Auburn if a couple members get shifted over to members of Team Coffee or Team Sun, etc. This would be interesting to see. Coco uses the opportunity, or the class as an opportunity, to kind of vaguely question RWBY about the crown by asking things about, well, what was Vacuo like when the crown ruled everything? When Vacuo still had things of value like dust, trying to get reactions from the other Vacuans in the classroom, as RWBY mentioned the fall of Beacon Academy, and all the people who fought there were a bit uncomfortable, so, you know, everyone's kind of throwing shots at each other under the table, it seems. After class, though, it seems RWBY did get the hint and talks to Team Coffee, saying that, you know, I can't officially assign you this. I haven't even told Theodore about it yet, but I've been investigating this on my own, away from him, or away from the public eye, because if I officially assign it to you, that's just going to draw more attention, and it's just... the people that we're trying to investigate will become aware of this, or more likely to be aware of it, could go underground, and it could just ruin the entire thing. And she essentially gives permission to Team Coffee by, again, vaguely hinting that, you know, if I find out that you've been investigating on your own, I'll have to tell Theodore about this. But other than that, you know, just keep to yourself. So she gives them permission, but also the words themselves weren't. And, you know, she gives them the go-ahead without making it an official assignment, saying that just lay low and don't draw attention to yourselves, otherwise this will have to become a bigger issue. So essentially find out what you need to, find some actual evidence, find the crown, and then come back to me. And RWBY herself is 4 feet tall, so she's a very short person, but also very stylish, as Coco says. She has a very brown and green aesthetic with hints of gold in there. Coco comments that her cape itself, or her cloak, might actually have pyrite embedded in it, or golden dust, or something like that. So we might get to see RWBY later on, and there's a lot of relation that Coco has between RWBY and Glinda Goodwitch, so RWBY might be very important later on, and very important to Theodore. My guess, at the very least, is that RWBY and Theodore, well, of course Theodore, but RWBY as well, is in on Salem, the relics, and what the school's purpose actually are in protecting the overall humanity and the faunus, etc. And moving into Chapter 2, Sun is now guiding Team Coffee and the rest of his team through the alleys of Vacuo, as he does admittedly know it pretty well, and it's actually helpful to have him along. At this point, I feel like he's going to become a hindrance later on, but Sage and Scarlet are actually lagging a bit behind because they're just showing that they're not really part of the team. They're still part of it, but also showing that they're a bit separate, relating it to how Shade Academy has walls built around it. Even though it's the center of the city and still part of it, it is also separate. And we find out that Sun actually has a cousin in the city, that she has a dojo. We don't know if it's a she or a he. I'm guessing it's the same cousin that was in the flashback where Sun saw that tree, that image that he conjures to center himself and use his semblance. But when Neptune brings this up, who's still acting pretty chummy with Sun at this point, even though apparently there's something else going on, Sun gets very pale-faced. stops walking as fast, and just, it seems like he really doesn't want to go see his family, and hasn't told his family in the months that he's been back in Vacuo that he has been back. At which point Scarlet kind of takes a jab at him, saying, just like Sun not to tell his family that he's back, which kind of depresses Sun. He's like, ugh. And yeah, Scarlet really has a target on Sun, and I'm guessing Sage is right there supporting him as well. I'm curious to see how this goes in the future. And before this subject can really be touched on that much, Velvet starts inquiring to Sun about why he decided to go to Haven Academy instead of Shade. And Sun essentially says that, well, Shade is always looming over everything. Haven seemed like a better place to go, that he wanted to go out and see more of the world. And in response to this, Velvet says that she's been to Atlas before. Her father is actually an Atlesian scientist, one who is close to Ironwood, like having a direct line of contact with him, similar to Pietro, which leads me to believe that Velvet's father may actually be one of the scientists in Pietro's picture, maybe worked on the Penny Project, and maybe we'll see the Mr. Valentina, or Dr. Valentina, or whatever his first name is. I don't think we actually got his name, I'll have to check, but we might actually see Velvet's father in Volume 8. Hopefully we will. That would be a nice little inclusion. But after we get that little flashback about Velvet working with her father and helping Velvet develop Anisadora, the hard light dust, because Velvet developed all of this herself, her father being a prominent scientist, very impressed with her, etc. And she's doing this just before heading to Beacon Academy. So very cute little interaction there, but it seems that Velvet's father actually lives in Atlas, whereas Velvet and her mother live in Vale, and there's familial problems there that may be touched on later on in the book. But returning to the current story, we see where Team Coffee and Team Sun are headed, to the Weeping Wall, which is just a large rock formation in the city of Vacuo. It's a porous rock that has water trickling down it, hence the name Weeping. It's about 10 feet long, 3 feet thick, and 40 feet tall. And it doesn't really look like anything too impressive. Team Coffee isn't really impressed with it, though there is a moment where Fox looks up at it and says, "I think it's breathtaking." Neptune, being a bit dense, just says, "Wait a minute, aren't you blind?" And Fox, being the beautiful man that he is, just turns to Neptune and just stares at him, making Neptune very uncomfortable, and Fox is getting so much enjoyment out of this. Part of the reason I love Team Coffee as much as I do is because I relate them a lot to kind of Team Avatar from Avatar The Last Airbender, and Fox is so much like Toph. I love it. I love it so much. Fox is an amazing character. I can't wait to see more of him as this story continues. But the reason they went to this Weeping Wall is because it is actually a shrine. Wrapped around it are cords of wire and pictures of people who are missing. The missing and lost of Vacuo. Sun had commented before, I think in chapter 1 or 2, or the prologue, that he's been trying to get in contact with some of his old friends, and they've just disappeared, vanished, gone missing. We know that the Crown is hunting people with strong semblances, but why they're doing this? Not really sure. Why people are going missing? They're not really sure. Team Coffee had even questioned Sun as to whether these friends of his had strong semblances. Well, they didn't at the time, but people are still going missing. The description of the Wailing Wall that we're given is that it's a porous rock and there's some kind of water reservoir underneath of it that is drawing water up, and it trickles down and can sometimes do so for weeks after rainfall has happened. And this is where it leaves off. Team Coffee and Sun in front of this Wailing Wall, and because of that I think there might be a little bit more added onto this chapter that we'll see when the book actually releases, but I have some predictions about this Wailing Wall. The wall itself is kind of sacred to the Vacuans. Well, maybe not sacred, maybe not the right word, but precious to them. It is one of the only little monuments that they have, something unique about their city. With this water trickling down, they don't actually use it for drinking. They can vial it and sell it as the Tears of Vacuo, etc., but it's one of the more renewable resources that they have, that the water trickling down and the water reservoir underneath can replenish the oases, etc. But my guess, since people are going missing, and seemingly a large number of people are going missing by the dozens of pictures or more, we don't get an exact number, but it sure as hell is a lot of pictures of people who have gone missing, they need to be stored somewhere if they're being stolen in the city of Vacuo. And considering the city itself is a desert city with most houses being only 2 to 3 stories high, that doesn't leave many options for where all of these people could be hidden. There's of course Shade Academy, which is in the center of town and is looming over everything. Plenty of space there, but I doubt that would get past the professors and Headmaster Theodore. I don't think Theodore or Rumpel is going to be a traitor. Maybe there is another professor that is a traitor, but I actually think they're going to be hidden underneath the Weeping Wall itself. If this water has been trickling down and the reservoir has been underneath the city of Vacuo for decades, hundreds of years possibly, however long this rock formation has been there and the city been built around it, then there's been plenty of time for this water to carve out a giant cavern underneath the city. Because with nowhere to hide this many people in the city or for the crown to operate out of, honestly, it's going to be a literal underground organization. If there have been Grimm that have burrowed tunnels underneath the city and the water itself has carved out a massive cavern, this is going to leave a pretty massive and open space if someone was able to get in there and have access to it. And we'll be in this cavern and tunnels where the crown is operating out of, where they're storing all of these missing people and trafficking people with strong semblances. Maybe we'll run into Gus and August Caspian again. I kind of doubt it though, because I think they're in the town of Kakina and stayed there, but we will certainly run into Bertilac and Carmen again, and most likely Brown, Green, and Pink from the beginning in the prologue. Hopefully getting a name for what their semblance is, or at least a more accurate description or concrete description of what it is that their semblances do. The Crown, I'm hesitant to say that this is a splinter group of Salem's faction, as I think the Crown was designed specifically for these books to be the antagonist of Team Coffee and for this story, rather than being connected to Salem, but who knows? The kingpin of the Crown could be someone from Salem's faction. There are 2 empty chairs there and are in Salem's, little conference room, so one of them could belong to the person who's leading the Crown, and that would be a very interesting tie-in. Now, I think throughout the course of this novel, Team Coffee and Team Sun are going to be brought into the knowledge of the world, learn about the relics, learn about Salem and the evil that they're fighting, especially if the Crown does have some connection to Salem. That is pretty much going to be a necessity, though it could be possible that the secrets are going to be kept for Team RWBY and Team Juniper when they finally get to Vacuo, reunite with Team Coffee and Team Sun. That's when all of that is going to happen. But overall, plot-wise, I do see the Crown operating in tunnels underneath Vacuo. I don't see Theodore or Rumpel being traitors or any way, shape, or form, but I feel like the Weeping Wall is kind of where their center of operations is, in the cavern underneath of that. But we'll see what ends up happening. As for Team Sun, they're going to have to work out some issues. I feel like Sun probably, maybe, won't be the leader of Team Sun by the end of it. We do know that team members are going to be shifted around as per the previews that we got for Before the Dawn. Theodore is going to have this idea where he's going to mix and match teams, likely to get people working together in ways that they hadn't before. Get a more sense of unity for all of the people or students in Shade Academy. Hopefully this means we'll see more of Team Auburn, maybe Team Indigo and other teams, not just that the members of Team Coffee and Team Sun just switch with each other, rather, having a mix and match of multiple different teams. That would give us a lot of different characters. Yes, that would make things maybe a bit confusing in the novel, but I still really want to see Team Indigo and Team Auburn again, as well as other teams that may have relocated from Haven Academy and from Vale, etc. So hopefully we'll see more of them, but regardless, Team Sun has some issues to work out. There's going to be a confrontation between Scarlet and Sun. I feel like Neptune is finally going to snap and not be so much of a nice guy towards Sun, for at least some portion of it. Sun's going to do something again, and that's going to be the final straw that makes Neptune snap at him, and maybe that will finally jog Sun out of whatever it is that he's in. It really seems to me that Sun has his own issues that he wants to work out, or he needs to work out. Similar to Blake and how Blake was running from conflict, I think Sun is doing the same, just from something different. He was very nervous about going to meet his family, about his cousin being in Vacuo, about going to see his cousin. Didn't want to talk about his parents in the flashback, like, I feel like Sun is avoiding Vacuo, avoiding his family, and running from something. That is why he has such an aloof nature. That's why the next thing to grab his attention is what is getting his full attention. He's so sporadic in things that he does. I think he's trying to distract himself from something deeper, and I'm guessing we're going to delve into that in this book. Maybe him, Neptune, Sage, and Scarlet are going to come to some understanding and realize why Sun is acting the way he is, and actually start to support him in his recovery and become a closer-knit team. As Coco said, Team Sun has potential, but they're just not meeting it right now. If they could get over the crap that they've been through, like Team Coffee has with Coco's bossiness and their entire adventure at Lower Cairn and all of that, then Team Sun has a lot of potential and could go far. And I think that's what this novel is going to do, is put Team Sun into a position where they will be a contributing team. Because all of them, each of the individual members, are skilled fighters, but they aren't reaching their own potential. And speaking of potential, we'll probably get all of the semblance reveals of Neptune, Sage, and Scarlet, and maybe some of Team Auburn and Indigo if they're introduced into the book. We'll see more semblances, and I'm looking forward to do semblance breakdowns on different characters and things like that moving forward. But for now, this is what I think of Before the Dawn, the little preview that we got, my ideas, and let me know what your ideas are in the comments below. How much are you guys looking forward to the events of Before the Dawn, seeing more of Team Sun and Team Coffee, and the dysfunction that is Team Sun, seeing more of different characters working together as the teams may get split up and join with other characters. Now, I do want to say this, that I hope Team Coffee doesn't get broken up permanently. If they're, on certain missions working with different people, sure. But Team Coffee themselves, I hope stays together because they are such a good team as it is. They're a hotshot team, very experienced together, and are working extremely well together. It doesn't make sense to split them up permanently, but if it's to help other teams, I definitely understand. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. I look forward to discussing with you. And if you did enjoy this video and want to see more RWBY content, RWBY theories, RWBY breakdowns, etc., make sure to subscribe, join the Guild of the Eternal Flame, tweet me at Phoenix Knight 7, join our Discord server, and I'll see you guys in the next video.